Okay, that's great. So hello everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to all the GreenLink team, and thank you for the great speech from Jivon. It was great, and we had already had a chance to chat, and I think it's very interesting the job that he's doing. So for that, I think big appreciation for the first half an hour. I will be now following up as it was presented about a bit more about the smart cities context, mostly in Europe, because it's where I'm based, where I do my work in both organizations, either in Babel or in the European Youth Energy Network. And I'll start a bit with the short introduction to smart cities and the urban trends and how we can see. Quick intro also for Babel. It's a startup from Germany that focuses on cities and local governments, supporting them to interact with companies. So it has an online platform with more than 100 cities and 350 use cases that you can check from real implementation of solutions into smart cities. So I highly recommend that. I can share you the link afterwards so you can have a look. And if you're really into knowing more about smart cities, and without further ado, I will start to introduce a bit why smart cities, why is this happening, why is this a trend, and why should we care? So at the moment we are seeing there is an urban sprawl, right? So we can see that at the moment worldwide 55% of the population live in cities, which is a huge number, and according to the United Nations it's predicted to increase to 68% in about 29 years. So I mean in 2050 we are seeing more mega cities, because people tend to live there more, actually more outside of Europe, less in Europe. It's still a very horizontal continent, although we have quite some big cities like Paris, Barcelona, London, München. So there is quite some of them, but you can never compare them with the mega cities in Asia, America, or even Africa. However, if you talk about numbers, we see that there is an importance of how we actually consume goods and energy in cities. So climate change is a very huge topic, and this includes not only smart cities, but energy, mobility, and all other sectors that cities involve. One important thing to know is that cities right now are responsible for 2/3 of the energy consumption worldwide. So it's big, it's major. 2/3 are consumed in urban areas. It's very big, and as a consequence, 70% of the CO2 equivalent emissions also come from urban areas. These values are not here to be underrated, because it's the data that we need. When if you must focus action, it should be primarily on urban environment. Of course, it should be inclusive and everyone should be on it, but in the world, the urban environment is important and crucial to know. Cities also have a lot of challenges. For instance, you have a lot of congestion from the mobility side. Mobility is one of the challenges that not only Europe, but all around the world, you're trying to face and tackle, with participation from the citizens, with participation from the municipalities, with solutions from the private sector. But in the end, it's all about behavioral change. So it's all about us. It's all about us having solutions and making the right choices. In the end of the day, if you want to pick a car to travel, or you want to pick a train or a plane, it's on our choice. Of course, we have to be enabled by the relevant government, private sector, and the local landscape from the city. One of the things that I want then to talk about today is, because as it was mentioned also on the agenda, we have to understand better how the pandemic will change the urban environment, and it has changed already over the past I would even dare to say 1.5 years, and will change the next couple of years. It's important to know that we started to have less and more freedom at the same time. So working from home, but at the same time less freedom, because so the pandemic itself, the virus, is preventing us to do a lot of things that we have done before, and this includes also on our health on our daily basis. We have some people are afraid to take public transportation, some people are afraid to do things that they used to do before, and this may or may not benefit for the cities. One example can be the use of disposable material that we were trying to fight mainly in Europe before, even there was a law for that. It started to be harder because now we consume much more goods when it comes to disposal, so masks, for instance, and this was a deceleration. However, now we also have the freedom to stay home and manage our daily base in another way. So we are not forced to take transportation and to move ourselves from point A to B, meaning to work, to school every day. And this it represents major difference when it comes not only to the energy consumption during the day in cities, but also into the transport and emissions that we may cause as a private individual. As a consequence, as in Babel, I led one study which was called Urban Mobility Strategies during COVID-19. This study so we interviewed and talked with 16 cities from across Europe, not only European Union, from 10,000 inhabitants to millions, to 2-3 millions of inhabitants, and we were understanding how exactly COVID changed their strategies, not in mobility, but also when it comes to innovation and smart cities. So how actually COVID acted. So was it an enabler? Was it more another challenge that they had to tackle? Or at the end, they just had to manage the health crisis and every other thing when it comes to energy, mobility, data from smart cities wasn't involved. One funny consequence that we got was that most of the cities were actually positively or neutral affected from COVID-19 because they had long-term plans. So urban environments that has the government and the private sector, so the all stakeholders that are cooperating with itself and with themselves and have a plan that they can follow in the next, let's say, 5, 10, 20 years, are the ones less affected by risks, because these risks are also already predicted when it comes on the plans themselves. So a pandemic, it's a risk that it had a very low likelihood of happening, but it was a risk that people know. It had happened 100 years ago. It had happened, this COVID had happened 18 years ago. It started in Taiwan, for instance. So it's something that's not new for us. We are just not that prepared. And for the ones prepared, this actually, if you take out the health part, which is entirely negative, and like no one can say anything against that, but there were cities that still managed to cope with the other planning in the other sectors. So let's say that long-term and clear planning is key when we talk about urban environment and local governments in cities. Another point that I would like to raise is that smart cities, we talk a lot about about data, about IoT and everything, but at the end, solutions, they exist, and technology, it's not the problem. So if we have an energy system of production with the greenest that can have, or the best public transport, or a data system that can track how people move, that this is not the key. The key is actually having a challenge and use these solutions to understand how we can make it better. So as an example here in this graph, we see that how actually data collection and analysis, this is for the mobility plans, but you can act as parallel for energy and for the other sectors and sustainability in cities. So if you actually use the data that you can get from your smart solutions, you are much more powerful when you plan, when you implement solutions. Same for the private sector. If private sector has the capacity to understand what are the needs from the cities, they are able, so startups, industry, big companies, they will be able to tailor their solutions to actually solve something. If we say that we're gonna, BMW is now developing, this is an example, it doesn't exist, but let's say that they are developing flying cars. We could have a flying car by tomorrow. Most of the cities in worldwide are at the moment still figuring out how they can use drones. So when you can use your drone, how you can use your drone, how the drone can collect data, can you use the data, who can have the drone. All of these points have to be clearly figured out by the local government before you start implementing technology. So when you talk about a smart city, it is important to talk about a smart planning, because it's not the technology that will make it a difference, it's the planning itself, the way that the city aims to use the solution that will make the total difference. And in the end, of course, the user, it should always be the citizen. So the citizens are and should be involved all along the process. Some trends that COVID-19 managed to help on urban mobility and sustainability was, let's say, now going on the positive side, they helped a lot people and citizens, and then of course governments, to reclaim public space. So take off parking, take off things that were there that are not used, so that people can actually have open spaces where they can breathe, that there's pure air, that they can be outside and not just full of cars or any other assets that are not really making anything in our cities. Cities look beautiful afterwards, people are happy, so why not? The second one is more active mobility. So people did not want to take the public transport because they were afraid. Of course, there's a downside of this, that people also wanted to get the more usage of, let's say, private cars. However, there was an increase. So there was more bike lanes, there was more people walking also for health purposes. So active mobility actually increased. A third point, and very important too, is that there was an increase of digitalization in e-commerce. So people had to work from home, people had to do everything from home. So instead of us being now meeting in person, we are doing this via Zoom. Zoom was skyrocketed in users, Microsoft Teams, Google, so everyone went on the completely digital. And of course, as a consequence, or not even a consequence, but as a result, e-commerce boomed as well. So we cannot go to shops. We have to buy things online, and we have to bring these things from warehouses, from where they are stored, to our homes. And this is a huge difference when we are planning our cities, because instead of having a truck delivering 10 boxes a day, maybe we have 10 trucks delivering 400 boxes a day. And this is also has to be, it was figured out on the go, because things were much lower due to COVID. But there was a huge increase, and this was not only in Europe, but in Asia and America too. Then the three on the bottom are more related to how we can actually take use of this. So time management, we can see when we go and we do things. So we have to prepare better because of COVID. We have to plan. We have to see that we are okay, that we do things. Second, quality of life. So it enabled us to go to places and work from there that we would never think that this would be possible in the past. And last but not least, as I mentioned before, we had to use data for planning, much more data, because people could not talk that much with other people. So we have to use assets such as data more and more to plan and try to get and treat this data and do better with it. Now I'm going to share, actually, it's more of an open question. So I even invite you to write on the chat. I don't know if I can see it. I was trying to find it, but I found this post on LinkedIn that said that it is the same for a city to have cars, electric cars, autonomous cars, or Uber or Lyft cars, which is ride pooling. So it was mentioned that it's exactly the same for the city traffic, for the emission, and for everything. It's just cars at the end. I like to think and this exercise, so how actually cities would change with these 4 types of mobility. So cars, electric cars, autonomous cars, and then let's say sharing of vehicles, which is in the end Uber and Lyft, which is called ride pooling. If anyone wants to take on the chat, to see if there is any one of these that makes sense, to say that they are not the same, that there's any difference. I wanted to check now. Let me see if I can open it. It's being a bit hard for me because I have too many things open. So I'll just move ahead and tell why this is just fake information. Because when you have actually sharing of mobility, you are decreasing the amount of cars that are on the streets. So our private cars even spend 95% of their time parked. So this makes that, I think I made the math, it was about 1 hour and 10 minutes average of usage per private car per person. while the other 23 hours they are literally parked on our garages or on the street taking space. However, if you use other modes of transport, you don't have this car. It's literally about like 8 square meters of your city that are free. More than that, if you have private vehicles, the average occupation of a vehicle are 2 people. If you have shared vehicles, the average occupation are 2.5 to 3.5 people. So you can see the difference, right? You can see that more people in the same vehicle, less vehicles. Of course, I'm not saying this is a solution. So if you have a bus, instead of 2.5 to 3.5 people, you maybe have 30 to 40 people. And if you have a train, well, you can multiply this and get maybe 100 or 150. However, it's always about perspective. There's always a better solution. You can try the best to fit with your environment. Of course, using a car, it's bad. If it's not an electric car, you have emissions, you consume a lot of energy, and you are taking space from your city. Also now, about when you talk, I just wanted to raise this point because all worldwide, there was this trend of having bike sharing and scooter sharing, and sometimes this is not properly planned. So if the planning, when you bring these assets into your city, isn't correct, the risks can happen. So for instance, I stop using my car and I want to use shared bikes, it's okay, I'm the citizen, I make the demand. But on the other hand, if there's 10 companies trying to put cars in, trying to put shared bikes in my city, and I don't want to use the shared bikes, they're gonna end up with risks. In Europe, there was, these kick scooters in canals, in rivers, trashed everywhere. In China, you have here the OFO bikes that was injected by capital, so they ended up in piles of trash. These are great solutions, but we have to understand how we implement them. The implementation itself, it's not that simple. My next slide, I have a couple of examples from Europe. Of successful bike sharing systems from Barcelona, from Lyon in France, and Milano in Italy. So these are called the docked bike sharing. So literally because the bikes are in docking stations and you take them out around in the city and you can use them. And then we have a floating bike sharing, which are the ones that literally are around the city. It was from Uber, but then it was sold to another company called Lime, which you may know from kick scooters. And are let's say, floating, so they are around the city without any docking stations. And now I want just to give them a bit more examples because I think it's interesting always to understand what type of successful implementations we can see from smart cities, not only on mobility, on data, but a bit of everything. I will first then start with one from mobility again. There's a company from Germany that's called Ioki, and they are doing shared mobility services. So in this case, ride pooling. And one interesting fact was in Germany, in Hamburg, where they implemented a shared taxi. You can call it a taxi or even a small bus, where literally people will ask for the demand where they want to go from point A to B on an app, and these cars are around the city picking up people and adapting their route to the people's needs. So it's not like a normal bus that goes to this station to the next station. It has an area where it can walk around, and then you ask, okay, I want to move from this area and I want to go from this place to this place, and another person wants to say that they go from the other place to even another place, and the car will adapt around it. So this makes, let's say, a flexible bus, and much better as an example on why this can be implemented, because this was not in the city center of Hamburg. The best is actually implementing this on the not that much center of urban areas, but places that need more flexibility, like suburbs, rural areas, even small cities. This is one of the, let's say, the best mobility solutions for lower investment and maximum of, let's say, results. Another example that I would like to give, I think this one is just very nice because it looks beautiful. It was a complex of housing that was built in Torino, in Italy, about 63 apartments. They call the 25 Verde building, which is literally a building that was a construction with plants, let's say with green spaces, and then the people living there. So they try to make it, because in this place it gets quite warm in the summer. So they joined thermal isolation not only from the thick walls and thick solid floor slabs, but also from the plants. So in summer, plants are able to attract and to get radiation from the sun, and also provide shadow, which decreases the amount of energy that you have to consume from the cooling. Same acts in the winter, so it makes it as well as an insulation that you can then, if you warm your house, the house itself will not lose that much of thermal isolation. So that's much of energy heating. Another example that I can then give, it's one way that I found also this very interesting. So how can actually use waste heat? So from the waste that you have, from the wastewater, the sewage, how can you actually use waste heat for cooling and heating? This is something that you normally see a lot in universities in papers, but actually was very nice that we could that they could do this in Cologne in Germany and actually implement it. It was not perfect, it had its flaws, but it worked. So they made 3 different sites where they implemented this in Vannes, in Mulheim, and in Nips. 2 of them, as you can see on the right, there's here the scheme. So you have the sewage and there's a heat exchanger in the sewage. 2 of them was an indirect heat exchanger. How does this work? So there's the mass does not get in contact with itself. It passes through a heat exchanger with no direct contact on the mass. So they do not mix the fluid, but the fluid exchanges energy. And this leads to the water that is coming on the bottom, the cold water that is coming from the school, from the heating system. It gets through the sewage and is that cold from the heat pumps that will easily get warmer. And when it gets again to the heat pump where you need to inject electricity, the amount of electricity that we are injecting, it's smaller because we have a smaller difference of temperature that we want to increase for our heating system. This is one good example. I guess they use it to heat schools because it was a public, so it was not for the private sector, for people, but more for the public schools. And they tried it in these 3 sites. They also did one of the sites, so the last one was also with the direct fluid exchange. So with the heat exchanger on the sewage, actually mixed the sewage with the water that is coming to warm the houses, just to see what was the difference. Of course, this water was not used for drinking or anything. It's just on the pipes for the heating system. No one was drinking or using sewage water to take a shower. Then for another example, and I think this is my last one, is hydrogen is at the moment very, very hot topic everywhere. I think in Canada, you know about it, and in Europe, in South America, in Asia. So hydrogen, it's important. It's hard to implement it yet because the production of hydrogen is still not yet that efficient when it comes to cost, and especially for the utilization. So for fuel cells in private vehicles, there are not yet that many stations that can be used for refueling. In Aberdeen, in Scotland, they piloted a couple of hydrogen buses and fuel cell vehicles. It was actually quite nice. And why are city vehicles and buses or long distance vehicles important for hydrogen? Because you know where they're going to be at and you know what they will do, so you can easily refuel them. So when you start talking about waste management systems in your city, public transport, so meaning buses, and even then logistics, let's say trucks, it's one of the solutions that you can implement at an urban level to make these things that we know that will happen. So predictable things, buses from point A to B, charging stations are there, you know where to charge. Because while you may want to change for e-buses, electric buses, but they have to charge, and charge takes time. However, if you have hydrogen, you can inject it directly into the vehicle, and you don't need to take like 20 minutes, half an hour of charging. So it's one of the perks of having hydrogen in vehicles. However, as I mentioned, the infrastructure is not yet there to supply in cities and even outside of the cities to private vehicles. So this is a technology that is on the way. So it's very, at the moment, it's very high on the agenda, but it's not yet there for a lot of implementation. There are some pilots, but you will see more and more in cities hydrogen powered vehicles. And I think that's it a bit from the Bubble side and from our side on actually a couple of examples and trends on smart cities. If I may, 2-3 more minutes just to explain actually the part of how I got here, like the studies, because you were mentioning good perspectives of people that really, and you, like young students or young motivated professionals that want to study or to take a master in smart cities and in energy. So I actually got here because I went to a master school called AIT No Energy Master School in Europe. So it's from the European Innovation Institute of Technology, and they have one of the top ones when it comes to sustainability. In Europe, it's very hard to find a competing one because also the universities that they have are quite good. So you can see here the top universities from most of the European countries. So in Portugal, Spain, Germany, Belgium, etc. Myself, I studied in Sweden in the Royal Institute of Technology, and in Spain in the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona. And the name of my master was called Energy for Smart Cities. And with that, I got the deep know-how on how, let's say, startups, governments, and research can act together and work. While I was doing my studies, I was not only studying the traditional courses, but also involved in entrepreneurship projects, in policy-making projects, in challenges that would constantly drive me to find and meet new things. And also, I had access to a network that in a normal university wouldn't have. I'm not trying here to sell any master. I'm just saying, from my experience, I took this master school in Europe, and it allowed me because of the reasons I said before. So it's an example. There are more master schools than this one. But if you want to look for something on smart cities, you cannot just look at research, because smart cities is much more than research. It's implementation. So it's actually business from the business side to the government side, how things work. And it's important for you to understand while studying or even while working how this works. This, if you are from outside of Europe, and I understand that most of you are from the area of Vancouver, and if you want to enter in Europe, I strongly advise to try this one because it gives the unique European perspective, not local, but more global. This is quite nice, and they have a lot of opportunities. So well, this was supposed to appear something here, but literally there's unicorns resulting. So one of the biggest battery companies in Europe is called Northvolt, is an unicorn that resulted from the InnoEnergy. There are a lot of startups there's, I think, about 98% of employment for all the master students that studied in this master school, and companies such as Northvolt, EY, Deloitte, even also for the Ericsson, Tesla. So everyone is working in the environment, and at the end is quite nice. I can also give them more input if you want to know, not only in this master school, on other programs maybe that you would be interested. But in Europe, if you want to move to Europe, I strongly advise this one because it made me, let's say, it made me much better and understand much more the ecosystem of smart cities. And that is about it from me. I have some information here of the deadlines if you want to know, but I think it just passed from this year. Next year it will be open again, but I can share all the information with you if you want. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Also, for the discussion, looking forward for the discussion with all of you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Okay.
Can I stop this?
Okay, I'll share my screen again. So now we'll have 10 minutes for the Q&A session. We'll start from the question that's already in the chat. And thank you so much, Mr. Cheng. You already started answering a lot of questions. We'll go over all the questions again with everyone. So please send in more questions. Questions don't get to answer during the Q&A session. We'll send them to the speakers. We'll collect the response from the speaker and then post them on our social media platforms. So Kathy, can you please let us know the questions in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So Rubik asks, Mr. Chan, are there any specific reasons that Kyiv and Hanoi were chosen to expand the Smart Cities project? For instance, not other cities in these two countries or other cities in other countries? For example, is it because these two cities have better location, facilities, or better social or cultural development? And Mr. Chan already answered in the chat, but feel free to say it to the audience again, please. Maybe, Mr. Chan, maybe can you unmute and explain your answer again? Is there any technical difficulty in a meeting or? Oh no.
Sure, I'll have to.
Yeah, how about Miguel can answer another question right now?
I think Miss.
Okay, now just okay.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me? Because it's so weird that I can.
Yes, now we can.
All right. So the question was why Ukraine and Vietnam and why not other countries?
Yeah, and why that specific city?
So I just typed it on the chat room here. The thing is, geographically and also potential in terms of economy and their infrastructure is very important. We didn't go to Vietnam. Actually, the leadership, I mean, some from the Prime Minister's office, they actually came to me several years ago. There was like this group of the delegation from Asian countries in between 2015 and 17. So they visited us in London because there was a huge success with the London Tech City initiatives. So in the beginning of 2010s, you're not supposed to actually see a lot of the tech startups inside of London because living in London is quite expensive. It's much expensive than living in here in New York City and any other cities in the United States. So it's challenging, the startups and working inside of London is not really quite, smart. So there was actually big issues that everybody remember what happened back in 2007. Subprime mortgage, the swipe. I mean, just it's actually happened from the U.S. and the entire European nations. They actually, suffered from it in many years. So there was a big risks and also challenge to the UK government as well. So the former Prime Minister, David Cameron, he tried to build up some sort of, metropolis Silicon Valley type of innovation ecosystem in the UK because they wanted to have it. There is a Silicon Valley and also other, the biotech valleys in Washington, this area, but why there's nothing about it in the UK? That was the first question by themselves. And then they initiated the programs called the London Tech City because there are lots of, the areas and neighborhoods and, without any industries and the companies, something like that. And the roundabout, Old Street roundabout, which is located in the northeast area of London, is actually comparatively very poor area. So they actually targeted this area, become a hub for the SMEs and or maybe tech startups. So they started it, and 5-6 years later, and you can see more than 300,000 startups working inside of London. The reason why they achieved this kind of goals because they changed the governance systems, and also they established new special laws and benefit package programs for investors outside of the UK or inside of the UK, and even lots of very interesting benefit packages for the startups outside. In the meantime, Tallinn, Estonia changed a lot. I think maybe that is one of the kind of the point that the leaders of the UK can change their mindset. So, you know, I think that that kind of trend had a big impact on the global markets and also the projects. So I believe that the human resources and infrastructure and also developing countries, there are common things that I actually see the first. For example, let me tell you a little bit about South Korean cases. South Korea is a developed country, and most of the projects actually the top-down initiatives, and government has a lot of money. They try to just control everything. But innovation is not something from the top-down initiatives. Innovation means much more parallel, much more democratic, because you have to face the tender system. So the kind of existing conventional bidding system is another obstacle for the companies, small companies, to, you know, enter into the competitive the markets. So there's something the safeguard, or to kind of the specific the, you know, the devices to help them out or protect them, to maybe have the better chances to compete with the existing big powers. So that is something that we are trying to do. I see that the Ukraine and Vietnam are actually one of the best cases, because these two countries has a lot of the merits comparing to other countries. Geographically, they actually situated very, you know, meaningful places, and also domestic market. Ukrainian actually has only 40 million people as a population, but they have abundant resources. Most important thing in Ukraine and Vietnam, they have potential, high potential labor markets. And even the first spaceships, manned spaceship launched in the world, is that basically they actually just built it in Ukraine. And so I think that the basic science in Ukraine and domestic market and the high annual economic growth rates in Vietnam, and they can be achieving many different goals. Probably maybe you can flash back in South Korea back in 1980s, you know, with the 10% of economic growth rates for 10, 20 years. So we see that this will be, you know, coming back again. That's why we are trying to build it here. But we're not only focusing on these two countries. We're also trying to look at the other areas. Metropolis, mostly BRICS countries, they have it. And also, I also see a lot of opportunities here in the North American cities, including Canada. I personally was invited by some of the politicians from Vancouver area a few years ago. I was so surprised that Vancouver is kind of really strange model if you compare to other cities, because you can see that easily. It's really diverse environments in Vancouver, but the people stick in their own spot in the district, like Burnaby, North Vancouver, Central Vancouver, Richmond. You know, the people are actually, they stick to each other, but they're not actually really harmonized to generate the synergy effects based on the, you know, diversity. So that will be kind of another thing that probably leadership of the Vancouver needs to think about in the future. So anyway, Brazil, Nigeria, some of BRIC countries, of course, in China as well. So that those countries are really interesting. The countries, cities we are actually taking a look at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. Actually, Evan asked right now, what stakeholder engagement processes do you both use to ensure that your work and solutions are centered around people? Why don't Miguel start?
Yes, of course. So the question is, stakeholder engagement processes do we use to ensure your work and solutions are centered around people? Starting from that, I would start to say that it's not only like what, but when do we do it? So if you are doing any smart city planning, the stakeholder engagement process should be done at a very early stage, and we can call it even the co-creation part. because it's the time where you have the most flexibility to understand and to know ideas. So you want to bring the citizens, so not on the citizens from the city, municipality, wherever it is, the relevant local leaders, so leaders of NGOs, leaders of local groups, people that have access to other people, the representatives from the local industry, so the companies that are already there, from the startups too, and then from the public sector. So not only the decision makers from the city, but also the operational level, and possibly even from the regional or national government. So you have to bring these people in the beginning to make sure that it will work for everyone. The ways that we can do it, you can simply do workshops with them. So you can bring them together, sit on the table with an open mind, a citizen or a local leader with someone from the municipality, and they can discuss, and they will both learn. I can assure you that. In Babel, we have done this in the city of Eindhoven, and it was wonderful. They gathered around 50 to 100 people from local groups. And even then people get in touch. They created like a Facebook group where they could speak about these things. So even it doesn't need everything very professional in that sense. People want to be heard and to contribute. On another stage, you can also invite people. So open participation. Some cities have direct participations where they ask people for projects that you like to do, or ask people to elect what projects they should do and when they should do it. Can also work. But coming back to when we're actually planning, so we bring these people to bring the ideas. So we actually make them think on how they would like to live. How would you like to go to work? How would you like to have the electricity in your house? And then you can also, of course, give them a bit of training and teach them how things work and etc. But it's important also to let them own the solutions, because if you're putting something there for the citizens and we want to be centered, they have to also somehow to come up with them at the same time as you are. And then you feed them information so that to think, and they will immediately get there. On another stage, when you are planning, so you're already on the planning stage where like the degree of freedom is starting to decrease. So for new ideas, but it is good to always see. So imagine you're implementing a local energy community. You should show what your progress to the local, so the local energy company, electricity, or even the people that are going to use it. You should also validate your work with them. So ask feedback and give them the opportunity, be very open on the process that for the things that you are doing it. Otherwise, if you close yourself for 1-2 years doing a project and you start implementation, then people's like, what? So we were in a workshop with you 1 year ago and now you're doing something completely opposite. Why did this change? So it means that our word, it was not meaningful. Of course, in some places you have to be careful with the politics side, because local municipalities tend to also sometimes, depending on the country, to be very political driven. So if you can, there's a risk that this can generate a political discussion that you don't want it to happen. So you have to be open-minded and make sure that you are not going to focus on any political decision, but more on what's the best for everyone. Maybe Peter wants to add something on that. Jivan wants to add something on that.
Well, you got the point. I just pretty much agree with your points. So we are actually building the smart city project with the central government and the local governments together. So what I actually suggest or propose to the government based on our projects, we're trying to introduce the new policies and new governance systems within the project, because we try to just provide all the stakeholders and companies to be involved in these initiatives, pretty much balanced and more maybe equal opportunities for them, right? So it probably maybe depends on the size, but various bidding methods can be applied, and depending on the size and the company and the projects. So which will be defined on master plan. So our process is a very simple thing. There are 2 different steps of master plan. The first one is basic concept design. So we provide the basic concept design to the local government, central government within 5 months. So there are a lot of different propositions in it, and most of them is a special law and also the governance systems and probably maybe to define the major agenda for the cities based on the priorities, and then the bidding systems. So that's why the decision makers and also approval agencies from the central government and local governments are composed of about 20 people, like committee members, the mayors and probably deputy mayors, and the ministries, and probably a minister, deputy minister, and some enterprises and representatives of local markets, local countries, and of course us as the master planners. And of course, most important thing is lawmakers, because the lawmakers can be invited, and their role is very obvious into building up the better special law for the projects. So that's why we just call it special smart city law on the designated area, because this special law cannot imply the entire country, because that will be very difficult, and also very the interest conflict probably may be generated soon. So what we're trying to do is only this law will be applied to designated area, which is a smart city zone. And so, as I said, the bidding system can be the existing systems combined with the open tech cluster model. So we suggest these people, this government, to process the multiple core programs. Each course, it requires about 12 months minimum, and probably up to 2 years. So in the meantime, we're not judging the startups or SMEs, any other companies will be maybe participating in the tech sandbox, but there will be third-party non-interest group or individual can be invited to as a judging group. So there will be actually based on the accumulated points, and the companies will be picked by the winners, and they actually achieve the projects, which is between $2 million and $20 million. So, we're building the better smart cities in a much more democratic way, and also more opportunities from the international private sectors. And some of the tech companies will be having biggest opportunities to become unicorns globally. They can also relocate to other smart city projects. Eventually, the smart city should be combined or collaborative, because one single smart city is not a market, because the government pouring a lot of money. To avoid that, the cities should be collaborated, but the leaders of the city, they have no idea what to do. So that's why the organizations like us are trying to match the cities bilateral way or maybe multilateral way to the good points and upside for these initiatives. It's very simple. We can, strengthening the bigger the smart city markets, where the investments can easily come inside, and also the providing the leaders of the cities or governments and kind of the better manifesto.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Cheng and Mr. Maska. We will now open up the 15 minutes breakout room. And after the 15 minutes, you'll be automatically direct back to the main room. So have fun networking with the speakers. I'll see you guys in 15 minutes.
Yeah, so everyone, you can choose to join a breakout room. Career you thought? Oh, sorry, I was recording. Yeah, so how or when did you think you want to switch from investment banks to investing in sustainability or smart cities in particular?
You're talking about my career?